So this is where I think the key. That's where we need to balance our own selves, not others. Because we're not in control of what others feel or say.
We feel that maybe, we see things from people, maybe I shouldn't know that, maybe I shouldn't have seen that.
But it was like, don't give everything outside and leave nothing for your husband, your children, the people who matter most. Because they're the ones who deal with you and put up with your challenges and your moments. So I had to learn that and relearn that at different seasons and phases of my life, and learn what was that, where was that limit, or where was that, different, where was that different phase? And some people very much said that to me.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to another episode of the MWA On Purpose podcast. Today, we will be talking about the concept of tokenism, Muslim women and representation in public life, the differences between private and public life, and how we can move beyond tokenism. So we're back together again to delve into this very important conversation, timely as always. And we are going to be looking at our own personal reflections on this, some of the lessons and wisdoms we have gained from interacting in different areas, and knowledge that we have gained as well, and how we can really be able to discern between authenticity and inauthenticity. And when it comes to the lives of Muslim women, this is something that we're probably all going to face at some point in our lives. So we'll start with you, inshallah, Hajeh Maha. If you can give us a little bit of insight about your experiences in public leadership and representation and advocacy, and just a bit of a summary to start about where you started, where you are now, and how things have changed over time, or if anything has changed in the first place.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. SubhanAllah, it's such a very heavy topic to delve into, because it's not something that you can actually just talk about and give advice about. But it is a personal journey. It is a journey in itself with so much richness and lessons along the way, and you grow along the way as well. And when I'm thinking back now, how would I have done things, like going back as I imagine now, the first public response that we had to have was during the Gulf War crisis in the early 90s. We had no idea what it was about. It was just a natural instinct that you followed, and you didn't even think about public or private life, because you were sincerely wanting to do the best and represent your ummah in the best way. And I think that's the key, is that you know yourself, and always a shaitan plays on you. There's doubt about, are you able to, can you do this? So, but you realize that along the way, you need to go and get some more knowledge about different things in the life of where, along your journey. So you seek knowledge, you seek ilm, so that your amal becomes more authentic. You're not speaking from someone else's words. You're actually speaking from balancing between your knowledge and the theory that you understand it to be. So it is not easy. It has a lot of pain, carries a lot of sacrifices, but you don't realize when you're in it. When you're in the moment, you're just doing it. And then later on in life now, looking back like nearly 40 years, you think back of certain moments and think, oh my God, how did I actually do that? I wasn't aware of some of the horrible things that were happening around me. I was more aware of how can we do it better, and how can we, because I come from a very, very sincere place of wanting to make a difference in our community. Never thought about giving anyone anything other than the benefit of the doubt. So when you start from that place, that's where your authenticity comes from. And you learn along the way. And as you learn and you grow, you learn to meet people where they are at. You don't expect people to be where you're at now. But yet, I must say, we didn't have teachers. We didn't have anyone to tell us how to do and what not to do. So we never had media lessons. We never had anything like that. But most importantly, we didn't have social media then. So there's a difference. Social media now plays a major role in people merging public and private life together.
Yeah. So maybe, Nemat, if you can share, when we're talking about public life, like, what are we actually talking about when we think of representation and advocacy and it being in public?
Yeah, I think, to be honest, it's something I struggle with even today. So I often, mentally, theoretically define it and acknowledge it. But I think when we think public life, we think, politicians, media, all of those sorts of things. I like to call it like community life to me. For me, it's like you're not sitting there trying to climb a ladder and make a name for yourself and an image for yourself, but like it's actually like, yes, we engage with public life. Of course, there's that reality. We engage with other stakeholders. We engage with policymakers. We engage in all of that as part of our why. What is our why? It's part of our work to serve our community, part of building that legacy forward, because I benefited from those who did that and engaged in my youth mentorship, and I have a duty to then pay that forward. That is my why, because I want other young Muslim women to also feel that they have, capabilities, which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blesses us all with individually, that they have connection and grounding, that they understand their spirituality, that they develop an emotional maturity. None of that happens on a snippet or any of those things. So when we talk about public life, yes, it's a reality. We have to acknowledge the dignity that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us, the significance of our purpose in our life, but also the insignificance of that as well. So it's walking an interesting. So when we talk about public life and represent, sometimes you have that imposter syndrome. You really want to shy away from it because none of us are perfect. We're all infallible. We all have to hold ourselves accountable. We all make mistakes. There is no one perfect way in everything all the time. And like you said, Hajeh, sometimes you're not even aware of it until after you've been in it. You're not even aware of your mistakes until after you've been in them. So when we say public life, yes, it is that engagement at a community level. What that means and what that represents, you can't pretend you don't have that influence or that power or that capability either, because then you're lying to yourself and then you're doing yourself a misuse or a disservice to your own community. So it is challenging. I do think, reflecting on technology in the age of social media, I think, generations that came before us probably it was more organic in a way. You sort of had to work hard and own your stripes and learn how to have a voice and a platform, whereas now I think social media has flipped that, and that has unintended consequences. It has pros and cons. So in some ways you're able to walk outside of the system and the constraints and the propaganda and the gatekeeping that exists, that they're realities that you have to navigate, and those are some of the challenges. But at the same time, you can then just have a voice without having substance, or why that service or that connection to the work or to the community that you really need to not just get in the room, but then get in the room and be able to actually advocate or express. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, just like to take a little bit more on that one, is that, like, as we talked about, like in the olden days, there was no social media. So you either appeared in a snippet on ABC or whatever radio with a few sentences or words that you had
there
said.
Was media.
It was media. It was
media.
real media that you would turn up on, or current affairs or whatever. And you didn't know how to handle yourself in that time, because you had either people loved what you said, or people, didn't approve of what you said. And it just stopped there, right? It stopped at the moment where people would either talk to you about it or send you messages, and that was it on a phone call. Now it's so continuous. It's like, and it slaps you right, left, and really it takes you to another level of abuse, right? So that abuse and that sort of harm that causes one, that's where we talk about how do we rise above that. And public life is, you don't choose it. Right now there are people who choose to be in public life, who are social media influencers, right? And that's their business, and good on them, and it's a business. Whereas some of us who are advocating change and advocating policy issues and responding to the issues that are happening to the community on the ground, we don't choose to be in the limelight, and I don't ever think that, I would choose that over my private life, because it's not a choice. So it's a balance, right? It's a balance. So now in the age of AI and all of that moving forward, how can I still become more aware, more able to use my knowledge and my expertise and my experience and my lived experience to help support young people understand and learn about moving forward, like, pass the baton on. Because it's not something that you just wake up in the morning and think, well, I want to be, I want to go and do a media, whatever, I want to be in the public life. You work towards you, and there's specialists in different areas who become the public voice for different issues that are relevant to the whole of society. We come now from a place of knowledge and awareness and experience from MWA of 43 years on issues that are very relevant to us. When we don't understand, we go and ask those that know better. So we're applying our Islamic principles there. And I would love and I would hope that young people would take that on board, or anyone else would take on board, that I don't need to know everything. Now I feel much more comfortable to say, I really don't know. I don't know. But what I know, I can express, but not from a place of arrogance.
But I think even for you to say you don't know now comes because of having experience in community, and from going through certain lessons and different ways of interacting with people. Whereas, when you first, maybe when you're first starting out doing the work, whatever that work could be, it could be public service, it could be, a social media platform, it could be in politics, it could be human rights and advocacy, it could be women's health, a whole array of things. But what I'm hearing is that it requires, before the public life part of it comes, it requires intentionality, right? That initially we need to be purposeful, right? So how do we then discern between the authentic and the inauthentic? Because we could get carried away with then, the it just has a snowball effect, like the public persona sort of thing, right? And we mentioned in the last podcast as well, the influence of the nafs, the ego, right? So being aware that there are things that feed into our nafs, our ego, and how do we protect ourselves to ensure we're doing things with ikhlas, sincerity, and with ihsan, with excellence as well. So how do we do that? Or what are some reflections or points that we can look at to maintain ihsan and ikhlas in our representation?
Yeah. Look, I think there's no magic potion for it.
No, there's not.
There's none.
Really?
I wish there was. We'd bottle it. We'd bottle it.
Exactly.
Right.
I think what it comes down to is your connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, your understanding of your own connection with Allah, your purpose in life, and how you take on that challenge of being in that public life, because it comes as a package. One day you get an award, people will clap for you. Within not within, not long after, people are attacking you. Is that what makes you who you are? Unless you know who you are, what you represent, what your purpose is on life, then it is so hard to have your footprint at that level in the public life. And I think it comes with understanding what the word izzah means, right? Dignity. A lot of us take izzah as like, I'm in different things. But to me, when I look at it, and I've learned that through now in the last 2 years more than ever, from what's happening in Gaza, in Palestine, and the people that are all of a sudden found themselves in public life, and more people are aware of who they are, and we know them by names. Well, they didn't choose to be in public life, right? They've always been privately doing what they want to do. They never chose to be that. So that is when I talk about it, I get goosebumps, wallahi, because when I saw that happening, and now more than 2 years later, I think, subhanallah, it could only happen when you have that sincere intention of wanting to raise the facts and go against the propaganda, right? But you do that with such izzah, such dignity, that you don't choose your followers. You don't go out there and say, I want this and I want that. You put it out there and people will follow you. But the most important thing is you do not lose yourself. You don't become what others think you are, right? Again, there's a public persona of who you are. Those that don't know you don't even know you have children. They don't know you have grandchildren. They don't know if you have a husband or not. They don't know who your parents are, because that's not to be shared, right?
So on that then, because that's the concept of sitrah, right? So this concept of sitrah, that, there are things that should remain private. And this is something that we are in an age of sharing. Right, we share anything and everything. And sometimes we feel that maybe, we see things from people, maybe I shouldn't know that, maybe I shouldn't have seen that. So how do we balance between that personal privacy with, say, like the professional representation or public visibility, and choosing what to share publicly and what remains private? How do you do that and still be authentic?
Yeah, I think to the question you asked before, it is really hard. It's a real challenge, because you do have to stay true to yourself, and you have to know that who you are, and you have to remember who you are, because so many people along the way will pump your ego up, and they will dangle the carrot, and we've seen it so many times. And you have to have people that you're truly connected to that can be honest with you. Yeah, and this is, there's been many lessons along the way, and there will continue to be, and it will get harder, because things are not just, the world is not simple. You can't retreat from the world. There is a 24/7 news cycle. There is access beyond. And that's why you do actually have to be very active in trying to put some demarcations around your own life, and don't lie to yourself, at the same time. And we have to recognize that there's things that are extrinsic. They provide an extrinsic value. And then there are those things that are intrinsic, and you have to be able to identify them. Because if you think they're all the same, or or you attribute different value to things, it's so easy. As soon as it slips, and you have to come back. You have to come back. It's not easy. It's a part of that jihad, enough, that greater struggle that we have within ourselves, because it also can go the other way. And I will answer your question, but it can go the other way. It can go into like a what's that? Like that feeling where you're frozen. You can go into flight mode, or you can go into freeze, because you're afraid to engage, or you're afraid to do anything because I don't want to deal with that. I'm not that. It's like there's the ego, but then there's the wiswas as well. You're not, who are you? You're not capable. You can't do. And yes, but at the same time, then you shrink yourself and you shrink the abilities that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala may have given you to not be something in the world, but to serve in the world. So I have felt both. I have felt very much wanting to shrink and reduce myself because I'm afraid of, I don't want to be trolled or whatever. What do I have to say? Someone else can say it better than you. But then what do? Not contribute, not serve, not lead a team, not engage with children and young people who need support. Like it's, so it comes back to that two sides.
And it's about, because and it touches on like what you mentioned earlier about, you've said knowing yourself and also knowing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But these are things like, these are concepts, right? Like when you don't know, you don't know. And when you've got things that are feeding into your ego, so we're very, very cognizant of the fact that that is something that happens. And then you're mentioning, but the other side's like, yeah, who are you, right? Who are you to speak? You're whispering to yourself, no, it's better for you to just sit down and do nothing. So both can actually come from shaitan, right? Because shaitan is trying to get you to just stop doing good. That's the goal. And shaitan will try whatever tools are at his disposal to get you to stop. So it could be, you're so great, you're so wonderful. So you're doing the work, but your sincerity is gone. It's no longer doing it for the sake of Allah or for the goodness of people. It's doing it to better yourself. Or reflective practice. That's right. Yeah. Or there's the other side of, who are you? Don't do anything. Just sit back down in your own private place and do nothing. And that's what I was going to say. That's a lot easier. I was like, okay, we don't need to do anything. Oh, I can rest. But then what do our teachers say?
Look, I think all of it is real. There are times where you want to retrieve. You want to sit in your own space and forget about everything else. Why is it me? Why do I have to put my neck out all the time? Why is it that I do? But then you think back from where I'm sitting right now. I think back, how much have I benefited? How much have my children benefited? Yeah, the barakah. That sort of blessing. Right?
Can you expand a little bit on that, on barakah?
The barakah of like knowing that, there are times, I'll share a moment, like it just came to my mind. During the early days of where we had the Voice of Islam radio station. And I was asked to do Ramadan program, the whole of Ramadan. I had young children, and it was a hot summer time, and we had to do it at a time just before iftar. We had to do live. There was no recording, and it was all that sort of, there was no digital. You had to be in the studio. So I'd be taking my children down there with me up there and sit there and do the program and go through books, and did that with young people, and we did that. And there will be so many times I would come back home, I would not have prepared iftar, dinner for my children. And I remember thinking in those days, now when I think about it, it makes me feel like I get anxious. But in those days, I always thought, it'll happen. I never thought about, like I do now, I have to have everything, because you had your kids. The most important thing is that we're all, doing it lillah. Because I remember saying to even my kids, don't you want to get hasanat? We're collecting hasanat. Just like you collect so much, put them in your little bucket and make it full for today. So we had a hasanat collection, and we would do that. And then coming home, wallahi, I am not joking. There are times I'd come home and I'd find food at my doorstep. And I'd think, where did that come from? Later I knew there were sisters who knew, and they would bring and put food on my doorstep. And the children were like, I'm like, oh, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us the food. I'm like, yes, but that's the learning. That's what I'm talking about. That your children grow up and they benefit, they trust in Allah. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that gives, right? Will allow others to know that this person needs it, right? And when it happened right there and then, it wasn't a big deal. It was just Allah sustained us. It was there. Come on, kids, let's go and eat, right? And we would be eating. It would happen so much more often than I would ever imagine, right? So this is what I'm talking about, the barakah, the blessings. It's not about monetary value. Like it's not about, and at that time I was not in a position where I was getting paid or anything. I was doing it sincerely, lillah. And when your children see that you're serving, they understand the meaning of service. And they do see the hardships. They do see the challenges. But at the same time, it is, and honestly, now as I'm talking about it, it has this sweetness taste in it. It has such a beautiful sweet taste in it that I pray and hope that everyone can get that taste, you know, because it's not easy to serve and it's not easy to be authentic. It's not easy to hold your dignity while others want to strip you away from it and make you feel like, you know, that what are you doing this for? Ramadan is ibadah. Ramadan, you should be cleaning your home. You should be, and don't,
You should prioritize feeding your children.
yeah, and don't think that I remember thinking, I'm not like everyone else, like you really? And even on Eid, before the night of Eid, I would be going out shopping for clothes for young people who had no clothes. We didn't have social media to say, can you donate clothes? You knew. And I would take my son with me and say, we're going out to buy. You choose what we think we want to buy for kids. First thing they would say, oh, we want helmets for the kids. Like, you know, why would you want helmets? They don't have bikes. We'll get them bikes. All I'm saying is that you don't intentionally put a work plan, a strategic plan and say, I'm going to do this and I'm going to bring you on board, right? You do that, subhanAllah, in a way that's what authenticity is all about.
You know, on that, Hajeh, I feel like something that, you know, my mom shared with me when I was young was like your head and your heart. When you're young, you don't know what is leading who. You know, you don't know how to distinguish between the voice of your head or the voice of your heart. But I feel like that authenticity, we talk about what does it mean? You know, I feel like it doesn't mean you are just willy-nilly, whatever, in the same places all the time. But it means that you're not pretending. You're like you said, it's not a persona. It's not a mask you take off when you get home. You know, you can engage differently. But you're still true to, you're in alignment with you're not convincing. It's not your head convincing your heart, you need to act in this way. It's not your heart convincing your head. There needs to be a feeling of alignment. And I know for someone who may not have experienced that, it can be really, some people go 50, 60 years and they've never heard of the concept of an ego or think. But in our Islamic tradition and that frame of reference, where it's a knowing, you know, and if we don't know, then seek it, because it comes out in different ways. And, you know, none of us are perfect. We all have our own challenges, but you spoke about sitrah, and sometimes we use the word privacy, and I just reflect on it. For me, I prefer the word sacredness, because subhanAllah, it goes back to first principles. Like when we were growing up, it was silly. Like if you answered the phone and you'll be like, you know, where's your mum? I'd like to speak to your mum in the home phone back in the day. That's right. You know, oh, you know, my mum's hanging the washing. You don't need to say what your mum's doing. Just say she's busy. She'll come to you. You know, those little concepts. Or, true. You know, I remember when you're learning how to like hang the clothesline, if it's, you know.
The bigger things on the outside.
The bigger things on the outside, like things on the inside. You know, these little nuances. Yes. And my kids are growing up in a day and age where the concept of privacy isn't really known or assumed, or it's looked down upon because it's changed upon the term of shame. As in, if that's why I want to talk about sacredness, because if you talk about privacy, it feeds into these assumptions or these tropes of this is public, this is private, and you're creating separation or you're creating shame around things. It's not from a place of shame. It's from a place of cherish. If there's something that I cherish, I want to look after it. I want to, you know, care for it. I want to preserve it. And that doesn't mean not letting it bloom. It just means pruning when you need to prune, watering. The things that really matter are always beneath the surface. If we just even look at Allah's creation and the natural environment, you know, what sustains the beautiful trees and the fruit trees? It's not the apple or the lemon. It's the roots that are beneath the surface. So that is a lesson and a reminder for us that it's not just what you see on the outside. If you get the award and if you get the sprinkle, that's great. Alhamdulillah, use it for a purpose. Elevate, amplify a message, not yourself. But there are things that need to be sustained, and that's not always in view of others.
Again, on that concept of sitrah, I think that sort of is not really discussed, and it's not learned in a natural way much anymore, because a lot of people are not gathering in homes anymore, like in the olden days.
Keep talking about the olden
days. You would have a gathering, like you'd have a sahara, people would come over, or you'd have some, gather people over because you want to gather, you want to socialize, you'd socialize at home. So you had to prepare your home, and your kids helped in preparation, or because people are coming over to visit. So you'd really get it nicely done. And I remember the kids would say, why are we cleaning up if it's going to get dirty anyway? But that's the process you go through. It's not about because you want to show off. It's just the process because you want the best for your guests. So when guests come, you are already preparing, you've prepared whatever cakes or whatever, all of that. And then when the guests come, there are certain doors are closed in your house that are no one's allowed in. And that's what I'm talking about. Your mum's bedroom is a sacred space. She closes that bedroom door. No one goes in there. And your child knows, no, we're not going in there. You can come to my bedroom. We can hang out in my bedroom, but we leave the door open in my bedroom, right? Because people think for sitrah, we close that. Not all doors need to be closed, right? So that you are aware of what's going on, and your children are being taught in a natural way about respect, dignity, awareness of people, understanding how you interact with other people, socialize with other people. And that's where when we come back down to public and private, because when you look at it, that's a public place, it's in your private home. So how have you prepared your sacred space to invite your guests in? That in itself is a clearly marked way of balancing between this and this, because when you're in a public space, you're utilizing that and creating a sacred space for you. Like whenever I do anything, I just do my awrad. I do it like in a way I pray silently so that I'm not there by myself, right? So I'm there with purpose, lillah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if I make mistakes, they're from me. I learn from my mistakes. But unless you know, you'll not know. When you don't know, you never know that you don't know, unless you have someone like a mentor that can actually be courageous enough to tell you, let's move from this to this, but without blaming and shaming you. I think that's the whole thing right now. There's too much blaming and shaming and naming people without really consciously being aware of the harm we're causing to others. And I think that's the point we need to look at. That's sitrah. How Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, istatiru, cover. But does that mean we cover for the wrong? That's not what we're talking about. Covering so that when I give advice to Nemat, I don't give it in public. I choose a space and a time when she's ready, not when she's down, right? When you're already feeling burdened and so much, you're not going to take advice, and you're not going to be able to change and move forward. And change is part of growth.
Yeah. And that's why I think bringing in sacredness about it. And we know that we do have limitations in the way that English can express things, right? And sometimes things can be misunderstood. So when we talk about sitrah, no matter what word we use, it's not going to capture the full concept. And it's the same thing like with haya, which is often, you mentioned shame. Sometimes it's translated as shame. Sometimes it's translated as modesty, but that still doesn't capture the whole thing. So there are all these different parts that need to be understood and then put together, like Lego pieces, and you can put them together in different ways. But, even understanding this public and private, right? Islamically, like each kid learns their 5 pillars of Islam and their 6 pillars of Iman, right? So your pillars of Islam, that's the external. They're the actions. They're the things you can say, speak, and do. And then your 6 pillars of Iman, they're the internal, right? That's your belief that no one can see or measure your belief in any of any of those. So we have this concept of the zahir and the batin, right? The external, the outside, and you mentioned extrinsic and intrinsic. And I think it's important to keep coming back to it because it all interconnects. And if we don't understand that, we can't just silo off things that I do representation now, I do public life now, I do private life now. No, because like you just said, in your home, there's still private spaces and then there's public spaces, but then you're choosing who you allow into your home as well. So even if we understand it from that basic thing of, okay, I have my 5 pillars of Islam, which I practice externally in my action, and then my 6 pillars that I internalize in my belief. So if I just use that as an example to lead me through, a guide to lead me through how I need to live my life, then there's no clash, right? And you're always coming back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And something we haven't mentioned is we have like these tools as Muslims to help us, right? So we have dua, asking, all right, praying to Allah outside of prayer. We have prayer itself, and we have an amazing form of asking, which is istikhara. And it's like we have these tools, they're there. So istikhara is doing a prayer, praying your 2 rakat, and then saying a certain dua that you ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help you decide between 2 things. And then you make a decision and you go. So there's still that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us this, this autonomy and this independence that you go. But if you're relying on Allah, Allah's always going to be there. And that's what you said before. You said, know Allah. But when people don't know, they don't know. So if we've never experienced being in spaces where, I actually feel a connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or I feel like this person is advising me not because they're annoyed or irritated with me, they're advising me because they've got my best interests at heart. They want me to go to Jannah too. So there is beyond what we can see. And when it comes to then this public-private, we see it merging so much in the way that we live our life. And we need to keep refocusing, right? And we've mentioned like these different aspects. Something that I think, is also another important thing to touch on is we spoke about representation, but you took it to service, right? And I think that is just, we're talking about being public facing and all of that, but you started talking about being in service. And so it's about balancing. It's not just about you're doing this thing only. What are you balancing with, right? So then on that, how do you then ensure that the people that you're serving are being served, but the people you have responsibility to don't feel resentment towards you?
Exactly. Well, you take them along with you. And it's not just at one point. Like, even now I remember, like, my children were young. I had my youngest son. I used to take his bottle and take him with me. And then at other times I'd dress him up in his Eid suit and take him to a dawah, like when we're talking about Islam. And he would be so happy, even though he may not have understood, but all the people would talk to him about, what is your name? How are you going? So he was just and then as your children get older, they choose which path they want to go. But as long as you are able to, and really you don't look at it as balancing. You don't think, oh, how am I going to balance it? Because you can never get it right. You can never get it right. There'll always be times where someone is going to feel resentful of you. But it's about how you respond. You can either respond by being defensive or respond by acknowledging. And when you're doing the service to community and you're doing it with purpose, and you have tawakkul ala Allah, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us so many lessons along the way from Rasulullah alayhi salatu wassalam and from the Sahabiyat, and understand that, not everyone's going to agree with you, but it's okay. But when you're young, it's very hard to think, well, what do you mean? Can't you see it my way? Look, I'm doing this. I'm giving 100%. You should be supporting me. You don't realize, but as the more you are aware of the purpose of what you're doing is lillah, then you know there's going to be challenges and obstacles along the way. And where people are not are actually being offensive or defensive is a sign for you to stop and reflect about what you're doing. How are you balancing this? And you'll never, like I said to you earlier, you'll never get it right. But the most important thing, the key is never, ever, ever be aggressive. Don't let your anger lead you, because when someone is not happy with you and you've done all this work, you've come home and you're so exhausted and they're saying something that irritates you and you
get
think,
under your skin.
Yeah. And you think, oh my God, don't you know I've had this? No, they don't know. How are they going to know? All right. So you just get over yourself, get over your ego and do what needs to be done. It doesn't mean you're a different person. That's when we're talking about public and private. You're out there doing so much. You've been there, you've presented, you've done, everyone's clapped for you and you're so good. You come home and you're just like, oh my goodness. Oh my God, I feel like I just want to cry, right? And you think, Alhamdulillah, that there is that way of bringing us down, right? So this is where I think the key. That's where we need to balance our own selves, not others, because we're not in control of what others feel or say. And just like when we used to go on camps years ago, we'd go on camps and it'd be so beautiful. We'd be on a high. I'd be driving back down to home and I'm thinking, okay, where I'm going, they're not going to know where I've been. So how am I going to now come back into that space, right? But you'll make mistakes. It's okay. But acknowledge you're only normal, like you're a human being, right? And it depends on which stage of your life you're at. When your children are young, it's different than when your children are teenagers. And then when you've got adult children, they have different needs. Or you have different needs from them as well, So it's such a beautifully orchestrated way of life. But it's for us to let go and really let it be the way it's meant to be. But taking responsibility. I think that's, again, how much are we responsible? Because a lot of the time we just want to throw it off. Like, it's like, come on, I've been out there all day doing this. And don't you understand? Look, I've just done that. But astaghfirullah, and growth will happen until the last minute of our life, the last breath. Alhamdulillah.
So what are some sort of internal checks or, things that we can do to keep us, coming back to center, coming back to making sure that our work is sincere and meaningful, that we don't just, throw it out, through our own outbursts and things like that? What are some things that we can do?
It was funny because Jazakallah khairan, Hajeh. I think there's been so many lessons to reflect on, really. And, you use the visual of the home and like how there's public and private spaces. You, from Hajeh Maha, learning even as representing MWA, 43-year-old organizations, there'd be so many different cycles of challenges in public life. And sometimes she's like, we're closing the blind today. We're shutting the door today. Yeah. There's a sandstorm. And it's like, not just because you're in isolation or depression or all those things, it's actually being active in that. So I think it's very easy to, we talk about Islam is the middle road, and it's hard to find it sometimes. When you're well, everything seems easy and I can identify everything. But when you're not well and you do go through different seasons in your life, for me, there was times where I had to remember, don't give the best of yourself to people who don't deserve it. That was a really powerful reminder for me. Sorry, I'm getting emotional. But it was like, don't give everything outside and leave nothing for your husband, your children, the people who matter most, because they're the ones who deal with you and put up with your challenges and your moments. So I had to learn that and relearn that at different seasons and phases of my life, and learn what was that, where was that limit, or where was that, different, where was that different phase? And some people very much said that to me. You don't leave everything You give everything, you give everyone the best and we get the worst.
Yeah.
And I had to relearn that in different seasons of my life. Seasons when I was waking up to a baby at night, every night. Seasons where you were coming home to, whoa, someone just, vomited everywhere, okay? Things like that. And you have Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bisakhir, people that reflect that are maybe 2 or 3 stages ahead of you, or people that can support you or remind you. But some of those internal checks are some that, Am I doing that? Am I giving too much? Am I doing those who are deserving a disservice? Especially if they've always supported you and been good to you and not ever intentionally mistreated you. We all make mistakes. We all learn those things, not from theory, from practice, Other things have been just intentional things. So yes, we talk about the 5 pillars and stuff, but sometimes it is bringing it simple. And have I read the Fatiha before I've gone into this meeting? Have I read my 3 quls? Have I read Ayatul Kursi? And have I said the dua of Musa? That is something for me. I might not be the most pious person. I'm sure there's many Muslims out there that are better than me, but that is something that I hang on to. And I try and I do view piety and ibadah as acts of service as well in our families, in our community. So reframing our intention, trying being abundant in our intention and our mercy. Inshallah, may Allah accept it from all of us. So those are some things that I do to decompress. Sometimes it's going just for a walk around the block, taking the kids with me. Let's get on the bikes and going, there's different things that I have done. There was 5 years ago, I never would have thought me going for a walk with my kids and husband was even possible. It was just divide and conquer. It wasn't balance, it was juggle, leaning in and leaning out. There's different times, there's different things, but those are some of the checks. And why? What is your why still intact? You mentioned, Hajeh Maha, that there was times where you were volunteering and doing these things. That helps me actually remember my why, because as I've moved into more of an operational role or a leadership role within MWA, and it's given me so much in terms of that barakah. It's given me so much in terms of being able to connect with my children on a different level, to understand the world that they may inherit, to implement decision-making and innovative solutions to their challenges at school, at their school, or their engagement in education or whatever, whether it's homeschooling or online education. It's a little microcosm sometimes of the broader world. And if you haven't interacted with that, sometimes it's like muscle memory. You sort of lose it. When I was in my stay-at-home mum phase, I felt that. I didn't know how to connect or interact. I enjoyed it in different ways, but at this point in my life, it has served me in other ways. So I forgot what I was saying, but that's part of it, inshallah. Yeah,
look, I fully agree. I think there are like seasons in our lives. It's so true. There are like that winter season where like you think, oh my God, there's no sun, there's no this. What will drive me? It's the same purpose, or in every season, that you will drive you, and that is Lillah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And sometimes you need to retrieve. You need to come back and go for that walk. Like for me, it's been a while because of whatever, but my walking down along the river helps me to not just reconnect with my own thoughts, but actually it reconnects with nature. Yeah, because when I see, when you walk along the same path all the time, you get to know the plants, the trees, the birds, everything, and at different times. And then you think, oh my God, this wasn't there yesterday. So it makes you notice the little things that you don't normally notice. And I realized, when I used to walk with my grandchildren, when they were little toddlers, and I'd walk on and I'd show them different things. And now they're so funny. As they're older, they show me things. So we've got a little, and I think, you have like stopovers, like signposts. We've got a little rock, and we used to leave notes or leave a little leaf in that rock. And we'd know that we've passed that path together. That in itself is just give you that sense of purpose. Yeah, that what we're all doing, we're doing it differently. We're here at different times, and I might not be here tomorrow, but I know that inshallah, I've passed that on, right? And that in itself is a sense of gratitude, lillah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when you have that ingrained in you, that when you wake up every morning, whatever you do, before you do anything, you do it, that sincere gratitude. It's like, and it's not the in thing. It's never spoken about in social media, except in little, like, what do they call them? Bites, sound bites. Have gratitude, but have gratitude for what? Who, where, what? For being, okay, but I have a higher being. I've got Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when you get older, you have stories to share. But when you're starting your life, you're creating stories together. So that's a balance. When you're creating stories, you learn from other people that this is, and when I say to people, oh, look, enjoy your days with your young children. And a lot of people say, oh my God, it's so hard. But I said, that's the memory that's going to keep you going for the rest of your life. Because when your children are no longer there with you, you have those memories, you have the sound, you have the scent, and you have all of that. At that moment, it was very hard because you were in it. But after you grow older, you're just like, oh, it's so beautiful, right? And you pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows you to be that conduit of hope, of gratitude for your children and your grandchildren to be better. And when we come to the community, again, some people would say, oh, look, you give me hope. Yeah. And I was talking to someone yesterday and I was saying, mashallah, you do so much and you are giving hope to people. And she said, oh, I don't think I don't know. And I said, that's the good thing that you don't know. But you are actually, your presence gives warmth and hope that others can want to know more about how you do what you do. That's where you balance public and private life. It's part of you as a whole. But at the same time, you don't expose what should not be exposed. Because people have a right for their privacy. If they haven't shared, then you have no right to share. That's where I think that sort of thing we're in at that here now. Because sometimes, like you said, when the people used to call on the phone, you'd say, hello, how are you? Whatever. Oh, my mum is doing 1, 2, 3. You just say, my mum is busy, right? That's what we all grew up with. But now you open the door to allow people into your private space. Now that it's all merged in because you have those audio or not those visual, like those devices that are already in your home. So how do you train your children to understand privacy and public life? And that cannot be done by scolding them, by hurting them, and by taking away those devices. When you've given them those devices, what have you taught them about how to use those devices? I think that's where we're at the moment, is that when I give you something to use, I tell you how to use it. Like when you don't give a child a knife until they understand what knife is used for, to cut up vegetables, and they become really good at it instead of hurting themselves, right? So I think here the key to move forward is that how do we really train ourselves first before we train our children? Because children are reflection of us. So when they see us have a bit more of a time and understanding of how we use our devices, then our children will do even better. Because children are so much better at what they do, better than you.
Yeah. And you've touched on something there, I think, that it's not just applicable to children, but to no matter where you are in your life, that whatever you bring into your home is going to impact the way you think, the way you behave, the way you speak to others, and also whatever you're absorbing. So we've got our 5 senses, what we see, what we hear, and all of that. So what we're looking at on our devices, we need to be purposeful with. And it is very easy to forget that, because the scrolling mechanism of what we're doing when we're on devices, it's just you go in and it's infinite. So we have to remind each other constantly. So, it's whether it's you reminding your kids, you're reminding your friends, you're reminding, your colleagues that what are you doing? What are you watching? What is that going to do? Because sometimes you watch something that makes you feel uneasy, and all of a sudden you're irritated and you're lashing out at people and you don't know why. So when we're talking about public and private and how these sort of spaces have merged, there's like this digital space that is having an impact on the way that we are, on our beliefs, our thoughts, our actions. That's right. And yes, it impacts children. It impacts, people who are married with children and older. Also impacts young people. It impacts everyone at every stage, right? And not everything, you mentioned earlier AI, not everything that comes through the device is true. And there are a lot of people that cannot discern. It's getting harder and harder to discern we started with, discerning between authentic and inauthentic. Now just basically what's true and what's false. So we need to start wrapping up the conversation, even though, we do want to continue on. But a little bit about, I think as we start to wrap up, reclaiming our own sense of identity, right? And how we do that in an internal and an external way. Nemat, what are your thoughts?
Oh, mashallah, I think we could do a whole episode just on that. But honestly, it's true. There's a canvas painting that I received as a gift at MWA that is sitting in my office that rings true right now. And it's an important reminder. It says the eyes and ears are rivers to the heart. And we don't realize with the digitization of all of this stuff sometimes that how we absorb it, how our children absorb it, how it impacts our sense of self, how it impacts our marriages, our connection. And I think the challenge, it can feel very overwhelming. Even starting to have this discussion, that's natural. The feeling is overwhelming because we are in a very individualized society. You have to do more. You have to be clear. You have to do, whereas before there was more like collectivism, there was more support, it was organic, it was ingrained. So yes, this is part of our struggle in our time. We actually do have to do that, but we also have to seek those out. And I think this is the beauty of having this level of conversation. None of us love to be in front of the camera or in front of a microphone, but I think it's about sort of giving others an opportunity to say, you know what, seek out these conversations, have them, think about it differently. And I think when we reframe and lead that, what does it mean? It means not accepting everything just as others provide it to us. It is around what you spoke about, and it's not to criticize just for criticism's sake. I mean, you spoke about language, we spoke about privacy, shame, modesty, haya, all of those things. It's not just a linguistic difference, it's a conceptual reframing. And we have to keep doing that in our own selves as Muslims, as Australian Muslims. How do we conceptually reframe from the principles of those who know better than us, that have taught better than us? There is a framework in our faith. We're not all perfect all the time, but we can reconceptualize those notions. They are timeless. They are universal. They are for every creation, for every time. So the reason if I can just summarize, why did I go on that little tangent about, being a stay-at-home mom and stuff like that? Because when I think about how my role has shifted, it's like you said, Allah has led me to it in different forms, created openings. I do think back to that time where I volunteered. I think back to that time where I spent years on the board in different roles, doing different things because I didn't have to. There was no monetary component to it, but I wanted to contribute from a sincere place. And I honestly go back to those moments because they're an anchor point for me. Don't lose it. It may shift and it may change, but come back. And so we need to do that in different parts of our life. Even when we're engaging in social media, sometimes we look at things that we would never look at. We would on those explore pages or those whatever, or we interact with others in different places that we would never do in person. We need to check ourselves as women, as men, as mothers, because it's a very slippery slope and we need to just bring a level of consciousness to it because it can be very unconscious and subconscious. Yeah.
And I think because we need to, like you said, it's a conceptual reframing because it keeps being changed.
Yes, the goalposts always shift.
That's right. So that's why we need to keep going back.
But sometimes we spoke about courage. It takes courage. Courage is not just what other people think it is. Courage is being vulnerable. Courage is, it's not just someone else's definition of being a professional, of being like, how do I bring that back into what it really, truly means to me? And that is authenticity.
Yeah.
And it may look different and we may learn along the way. We're not always going to get it right.
That's right.
Yeah.
Hajeh Maha, final thoughts?
That's true.
I'm just reminded of like the river. The river moves in different places. It starts off from the mountain, goes down, and then it goes out to the ocean. But it stays a river. It stays water, right? The water never changes. It's H2O, is that right?
Yes.
I remember that from science. And I think we as people have our ups and downs, but the most important thing is our foundation, like what you talked about. That internal, that external, that all binds in together as part of who we are and what our purpose is. But bringing it back down to our responses to what's happening in social media and all of this, I think, before we do anything else, we've got to take responsibility of our own being, of our own way of interacting now with this social media platform. It can be used for good and it can be used to abuse you and abuse others, and it causes harm. But if you use it in the right way, just like I was saying earlier, like a knife, it could harm you if you don't know how to use it. And if you could really use social media and teach your children to be aware of what social media is all about, just like you would teach them how to use a knife in the kitchen. And if you can use that concept, I know that, of course, we make mistakes. Of course, we'll cut our fingers every now and then, but it's by accident that we do. When we do, we stop and think, okay, what do I do next? How do I do it better? And because for every social media platform, there's different tools. Not that I know anything about social media, but I'm looking at it from that side of being able to interact. I don't like social media, but I use it. But I use it when I feel like maybe I can inject a bit of hope or like sweetness in someone's heart. That's all. I don't want to use it to irritate anyone, or I don't use it to debate anything, because I think when you want to debate something, that's when it starts with children. Give your children the ability to start conversing with you without fear. Because the thing is, on social media, no one fears anyone, right? There's no boundaries. So when we teach our children boundaries, we've got to respect our own boundaries. And I think there's no difference between here or there. Everywhere that we are, our Islamic principles apply, which is ihsan, which is rahmah, mercy, and compassion, with purpose. So I will treat you as in the way that I would like you to treat me. The same thing applies everywhere, anywhere, and always, right? And I think that's the critical point, is that we say, oh no, this is only social media. No, you are harming those that you may not even know you've harmed. Why don't you just find somewhere that you can actually engage and bring that sort of like that, just plant that seed of hope in people's hearts and see how it will travel. It will really, it would be amazing. I always talk about an avalanche of peace, Why don't we do that, inshallah? And that could be done. Imagine if you raise your children in that way. But I think what we're finding is that because there's still a lot of unresolved pain and trauma in adults, and the way that we respond to children is again a way in aggression and whatever. And that needs to be heard. And I think, again, to move forward, we need to start listening with sincerity and to listen without having to give advice, but to really move forward so that we teach our children the art of listening. Listening without having to attack. Because on social media, we're always attacking. Take it, digest it, and honestly, and then we go back to Rasulullah alayhi salatu wasalam's hadith. It says, if you disagree with your brother or sister, don't respond until after 3 days, right? 3 days. Why is that? Taking time out to really settle, understand, and you'll realize, well, it's not worth it. But social media is spontaneous, right? instant. You respond and then you think, oh my God, why did I do that? And then you can go delete it, but you've already hurt other people. And we've seen that, and we see that continuously. So inshallah, as we move forward, we want to take the best of everything, but we acknowledge that we're humans, we make mistakes. And unless we know and are able to understand and name our mistakes, we will not be able to change, and we will not be able to see the effect and the ripple effect that it has on the children and young people moving forward.
The last time we all spoke on the last episode, Hajeh Maha, you mentioned Sitna Khadija radiallahu anha. Like, when I think of public, private leadership women, honestly, we don't have to look very far in terms of that, because we segment our life. We segment social, digital, private. Yes, we need to be aware and have demarcations, but it's not like we're different people in all of those spaces. We still need to carry. And then when I think of, the colonization and the colonialism and all the other stuff in this part of this world that has sifted through that, that's not, they're assumptions, they're tropes, if you just look back at our own history as Muslim women, you see leaders, you see business women, you see educators, you see teachers, you see matriarchs. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
And we are sometimes made to believe that that's not what a Muslim woman looks like. No, actually, yes, that's what I mean, reframing, not being led but leading. But yes, it's hard because it means you need to be active. Your heart, your mind, your soul needs to be aware. But when you're with others, it helps. It really does help.
Absolutely, it does. And I think that's probably another episode. And how do we take the examples that we do have and apply them today? Because some people might say, well, you're talking about someone who lived years ago. Like, what relevance does it have to our life? Oh my gosh, it has so much relevance. Like, we know. And when we learn about the lives of Sitna Khadija radiallahu anha, or Sitna Fatima or Aisha, or any of, you mentioned the Sahabiyat at the beginning, we can take so much, and it helps us because as Muslim women, we're not alone. And even for people who may feel that they are isolated, there are people who don't have Muslim community around them, then how do they lead into we've mentioned ukhuwah in the last episode, how do they lead into ukhuwah, the sisterhood that we have as Muslims? And so we've spoken a lot about the challenges, but I think there are so many blessings that come with being a Muslim woman that we can actually just be able to engage with and really highlight those for ourselves, because it's a reframing for us. So inshallah, we hope that this episode causes, people to think about different things, food for thought. And we actually do want to hear people's thoughts and reflections on things, right? And suggestions of different paths to go down and discussions to have, because this is all based on communication that we have with people, right? So inshallah, we hope to be able to learn as well as we continue. And I think when we're talking about tokenism and representation, it's not just about fame and image. It is about that sincerity, that authenticity. And we need to have the right people around us to help us to be able to bring that into the space. So inshallah, we look forward to having another conversation on the next episode of the On Purpose podcast. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.